Beyond 3D.
Hi guys, welcome to this week's edition of Beyond 3D. Matt and Clint here. Hopefully everyone had a great week, and we will continue to give you some of the great information that we at least feel will set you on a path of liberation. I think liberation is very important. Spiritual liberation and liberation insofar as what's going on this planet we call Earth and all the goodies that we have to put up with on a daily basis. So Clint, how are you this week?
No matter where you go, there you are.
Yeah, basically. I agree with that. It's been an interesting week, and breaking news, Ted Cruz is gone. And I find that very interesting. Now, I know Clint doesn't care about this because Clint has made it clear on this show on many an occasion exactly what is going to happen with the presidential race in the United States of America. He has picked the person who is going to win that race, and he is adamant about the fact that that is going to happen. At this point, I tend to agree with him. No way around it because of everything that's going on right now. So it has been an interesting week. We hope you all enjoyed last week's show as well. You were going to say something, Clint?
I was. That's cool. That's cool. I hope everybody enjoyed last week's show as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think the information was fantastic.
What I was going to say is when Hillary reaches her goal, I'm going to have to really lock myself away somewhere and put something together that I can present on our show.
Yes.
That I don't deserve any admiration from anybody for being able to say as far back as 3 years ago, before we even started this show, that Hillary Clinton was going to become the president, the first female president.
Okay.
I'm going to have to create a how I came to that understanding, a show. I'm going to have to smash a show together for us.
And I think that would be a really good idea because if you do it, I think one of the first things you're going to have to put in that show is something about a thing called Bilderberg.
Oh, God. You know,
along with other things.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, Matt. Where would you just go? I have to stop at this point. It's like Christopher Turner, Chris Turner, who's doing Repcon.
Exactly. Yeah.
At the moment.
Yes.
Now, when he started doing Don't Mention the Reptilians.
Yes.
That documentary. He, as he said, he could have just kept going on and on and on. The tree of evil could have just branched off in so many different directions. Different documentaries could have happened.
Absolutely.
So you're going to have to draw the line for me.
That's easy.
Where I have to stop.
No, it's not easy, actually.
No, it's not easy. It's not. People, look it up.
It's hard, but we'll do it. We'll get it done.
It's we business.
We'll get it done. You do the stuff, and I'll go, all right, that's enough. Oh, that's enough.
It'll have to be my Christian cross to carry.
I'll be able to say that's enough for you. So it'll be okay. We'll do okay. Anyway, back last week.
So I'm good anyway, thank you.
You were good? Yeah, good.
But what do you mean were? Do I not look good now?
Yeah, you're good now. All right.
So you're past or present tense?
Let's say we'll deal with the present. In the present tense, you're fine. Everything's well.
Because it's a gift.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Very good.
Go for it. Let's cruise.
Let's cruise.
Beyond
3D. Coming up soon, guys, we have the rest of the interview that we did last week with Mark Devlin for you. But before we get to that, there's been a lot of interesting things going on in and about the news. And one of the things near and dear to our hearts, planets found near a star. An international group of scientists has discovered 3 Earth-like planets orbiting an ultra-cool dwarf star only 40 light years from here, the European Southern Observatory has announced. Now, for me, what they're basically saying is that if you see a star up in the sky, suffice it to say that they're going to be planets in a circular orbit around that star. That's basically the way I'm looking at this. What about you?
You are talking to me.
I am talking to you, Clint, yes.
As I used to tell my children and my friends who are still plugged in to the system with closed minds, as I have told them and my children, my daughters, when you look at a star, it's not necessarily one planet or one body of mineral. The light that's resonating sometimes, and they've actually documented, there is a percentage, don't quote me on it, But sometimes that light that you're looking at as a singularity is shining as a multiplicity. So you're looking sometimes at entire galaxies so far away. They're shining as one. They're not when you look up at the night sky, it's not necessarily 1 star, 2 star, 3 star. You could be going 1 galaxy, 2 galaxy, 3 galaxy.
Good point. It's a very good point. But now, when you look at that, when you look at it from that point of view,
I just changed a line of thinking, didn't I?
Yeah, it did. It actually makes sense.
You're welcome.
It does make sense. Yeah, thank you very much. But 40 light years away.
Can I just say I'm very rarely wrong, but I usually am always right.
Yeah, there you go.
No, I'm just being an ass. That's just such an ass of a thing to say. But I'll get you to laugh.
Oh, it's funny though. But what they're going to find out there, in my opinion at least, is the fact that there are a lot of planets out there. There are a lot of Earth-like planets out there, and ultimately they will have to say it. They're just too egotistical right now to say it. There are a lot of Earth-like planets with a lot of human beings on them.
There's plenty.
I know that.
Plenty.
Been to a few. The next story here, acclaimed Herald Sun astrologer Jonathan Cainer dies.
Now, he was an astrologer not just for our paper in Melbourne, one of our major papers in Melbourne, but multiple major newspapers around the world.
So syndicated, yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
As far as the UK.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Well, it's fantastic that he was syndicated. Not very fantastic that he died, depending on your outlook. But 58 years old is kind of young.
Can I just say, I don't like that saying when I say, can I just say, I'm going to change that up a little bit.
Okay.
I would like to make note that Jonathan Cainer. Why are you turning the page over?
Cainer.
Thank you. I knew I'd said it wrong. I just want to make sure you're awake. It is late. It is late. Him and I share the same birth month, so we share the same star sign. Now, they made note of something that was written about his star. So, if he was predicting for myself for this month, it was advice predicting technically his own death and to celebrate life right at this point in time, because you never know how much time you do have left, and that's very it's normal philosophical to think of life like that, but not many people stop and do. But I read it that time.
Okay.
I saw it for myself. I went, and that's great. Everybody needs a little pick-me-up.
Sagittarian, it said in the paper?
Yeah.
December-ish?
December-ish.
Yeah. Okay. Astrology. A lot of scientists don't like astrology. They find it to be a little too out there. The woo-woo set, I guess you would say, from scientific terms. But the thing, not about that. Here's the thing about astrology for me. If you do your spiritual work, you can outgrow your chart. It no longer holds the same sway it held over you when you were born, depending on what you do in life.
When I was a young tadpole, my grandmother, what was she? Yeah, she was my nana. Nana, okay. I had a nan and a nana. So this was my nana. She was heavily into yoga, heavily into astrology, and my grandfather, my father's father, heavily against it.
Okay.
And from a very early age, when I would see what she was into and she would tell me about it, then when he had time with me alone, he'd be like, oh, that's just... forget it.
Interesting.
But I've had that transition.
Yeah.
So as I got a bit older, I started looking into it and it started being interesting. And then what happens, not a lot of people, I'm generalizing when I say that. Some people, if they're going through a period in their life, which is a negative period or a bit of a downer, and they read something in their star signs, they can identify with it as well. Yeah. But also, it could be possible that it is for them. There's no reason why it couldn't.
It helps some people.
It
gives people a pick-me-up at certain times in that regard.
But it is based on science fact, though, astrology.
It is, but it's almost as it's like an astronomer now.
Say borderlines on metaphysical.
Yeah, and that's where the scientific community loses it.
Yeah.
They don't like anything that can border on metaphysical unless it's under their terms.
But metaphysical isn't... See, I say that word, and some people who haven't fully accepted or experienced this, some people would hear the word metaphysical and think, how Harry Potter, that kind of magic. Okay, but metaphysical technically is an extended science, isn't it? It's more of an extended science that we don't yet fully understand how it works. Is that your opinion, or is that how you look at metaphysical?
Yeah, I'm. When you said metaphysical, I'm not thinking Harry Potter at all.
No, but no, sorry, I wasn't saying you. You're saying
no.
Some
I'm
people,
thinking no, but some people would. But no, I'm thinking more along the esoteric sciences, and I'm thinking more along the lines of string theory right now. Where they're coming up with and saying, "Wait a minute, what is actually going on here?" They keep finding the smallest particle, and they find a new smallest particle every year.
Thank you, CERN.
So yeah.
Thank you, CERN, for doing that 40 years ago, before you were allegedly built.
So yes, when you look up, there are constellations up there. I tend to read my own star signs and my charts and stuff like that. I had a chart done when my daughter was done. I have no problem with any of that, because if there's even one little snippet that can help someone, it's worth it. For me, if it helps them move forward, if it helps them evolve, it's worth it. But a lot of the scientific community just doesn't want to be bothered with it. They think it's not a...
But then, I'm going to say that I don't call them true scientists. I don't call them true scientists, because therefore what they're not doing is exploring every option.
I agree with that.
Without fact.
I agree with that.
So it's easy for them to go, I'm not putting energy into exploring that, because my opinion is there is no way. That's Harry Potter.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's what I was referring to earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, well, for me, it's interesting when you say scientist. This just popped into my head. I was reading the other day about the famous last words of certain people in life and everything like that. They had James Dean and all these people up there, their famous last words. And the one that I thought was very interesting was Sir Isaac Newton. I can't remember it, but it was so long-winded, I just went, yeah, nobody would say that at the end. And the fact of the matter, if they were dithering on like that at the end, I think you'd want to probably hit them with a brick or something like that and put them out of their misery. And science, the scientists, the things that they put you through, the things that they want to prove, the method that they have to use in order for them to agree that something actually exists, in my opinion, come on. Get over yourselves already. Let's move on to something that's a little bit more... esoteric, let's say. That's my feeling about it, anyway. Waxing philosophic. Well, what do you think? He's thinking, folks. Don't worry.
No. I'm just...
The brain cells are...
I'm absorbing what you're saying.
The brain cells are firing.
You know, just like everybody else at home who's listening to what you're saying, I'm sitting here engrossed in what you're saying, and I'm listening along with them and processing it.
Well, I'm a fan of science. I was an astronomer as a kid, an amateur astronomer. I love it, and I can understand the scientific method.
You know, I just
can't understand. No, I loved it.
No, I hated it.
I loved it
when I was a kid.
Loved it.
I hated sport too.
I was not that big of a fan of it. I got into sports in high school, but I digress.
No, actually,
when I was a kid,
can I digress?
Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Let me digress.
I'll let you. Yeah, you go ahead.
I didn't hate science. I loved science fiction. I hated not understanding and not having the option to understand. Because back in the early 70s, there was no option done. Early 70s Australia, boy, you don't learn science. What are you doing? You know? you just...
We had fun with science, actually.
We clap for joy. No, we don't.
For us, it was getting up at 5 in the morning to watch the eclipse of Venus and things like that through a telescope.
Yep.
Loved it.
Halley's Comet.
I still have photos at home of Hale Bopp when it came through in '97 or something like that.
Yeah.
Over San Francisco, and you'd look out over the Golden Gate Bridge, or the Bay Bridge, and you see this huge Hawking Comet hanging in the sky. It was fantastic.
Been around for both. I've been around for both.
So hey. I have no problem with science. Where I find science misses the mark is the fact that it doesn't embrace science fiction, the fact that it doesn't embrace astrology, the fact that it states that none of these, if we can't prove it, it doesn't exist, screw you, we don't want to be bothered. That bugs me.
Art and artists create it. Life makes it happen. We think it, therefore it becomes, and to think it, therefore that is a creative process. So that has to happen first. Once that happens, then people start using that creativity to develop and write and come up with science fiction, really good science fiction. That's when even more creative people then go, well, how can we make this happen? I'm a student at MIT. Let's build this for a project. And then, you know what? It actually takes off.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't make it to the free market, which very rarely it does, it gets bought up and snapped up by Big Brother.
All those guys, yeah.
All those guys are only in it for themselves for $1.
Oh, well. Life.
So.
Life. So what else do we have to do?
Abracadabra.
Oh, I know what else we have to do.
Think it, and there it shall become. My words become actions, was it? Abracadabra? I've mentioned it before.
You did.
Words. I have. I can't remember what it was.
You did mention that on the show before. We'll think of it. We'll put it up on the Facebook page.
My words become life, something like that. So you think it, therefore it becomes. That's life.
Not bad.
Beyond 3.
Last week, Mark Devlin, fantastic information, really great book called Musical Truth coming out there, and he's going to start moving around the planet a little bit more, hopefully getting down to the Australian continent to grace us with his presence as well. But last week wasn't enough, so what we're going to have to do is we will have to get back into it, because he gave us a lot of really good information about his take on the music industry, specifically in rap music, from its beginnings to its demise, and what is currently called rap music, which is, as he describes, is nothing like rap music used to be. So it'll be a very interesting show for you this week. Sit back, relax, and definitely enjoy it.
Beyond 3.
Continue and say welcome to Beyond 3D, and we are pleased to have Mark Devlin, DJ and author, back with us to talk about the music industry and certain things that may be going on behind the scenes that a lot of people that listen and love music may not know about. And if they did know about it, it would change a lot of their perspective about what's going on in the world and what's going on in the industry they love so much. So Mark, welcome back to this week's edition of Beyond 3D. We left it off last week talking about Kanye West, and as Clint said, we wanted to get into the Prince phenomenon. This is something that affected quite a number of people that I've talked to. A lot of musicians were in shock. A lot of people were saying, what the heck is going on here? It didn't make a lot of sense. And we're talking about, I call Prince a musician's musician. This was a person, as you talk about spirituality, this was a person, as Clint and I were talking earlier about, he was connected to Source. He could bring things through and interpret them in such a way that could get to the masses. So let's get into Prince a little bit. And how did you react when you heard that he had left the planet?
Well, it was a bolt out of the blue for me, completely unexpected, as it probably was for most people, because he's kind of been out of the public eye for quite some time. I know he's still been doing concerts and he's still been making music, but he's not been high profile, he's not been in the public consciousness for quite some time.
Yes, he was actually he was literally just here in February doing his one-man and piano tour.
Right. Yeah, I'm aware that he's been, active still, but I'm just saying that he's not been a major name in people's minds.
Yes, that's true.
In the last few years. I think there's been a generational shift since his heyday of the 80s, and I think what people expect from the music scene now is very different to the sort of stuff that Prince used to put out. I mean, I'm just... It may be me getting old, and I have to consider whether it is that, but I just look at music that is popular now, music that's in the charts, and none of it speaks to me in any meaningful way, and I really do mean none of it.
Thank you for saying that.
Thank you. I'll just golf clap the man.
We're clapping you for that, because we feel the exact same way.
I'm glad it's not just me. I mean, I look at it sometimes and I think, Jesus, am I really that old and that out of touch, or is it just that the music is shit?
No, the latter.
The latter.
Excuse my cursing. Is it just that the music is rubbish? And there's really nothing about it that I appreciate anymore. I don't like the production styles. Everything is electronic and digital and grating. You don't get any soulful samples anymore in hip-hop like you used to. The lyrics just seem to me to be completely vacuous and ambiguous, and they don't say anything meaningful to you. You don't hear artists expressing themselves the way great artists like John Lennon and Marvin Gaye and Bob Marley and people like that used to. There's no message in the music anymore. It all sounds the goddamn same. It does to me anyway. It's templates and blueprints once again. And you hear about songs that have been written happen for artists like Rihanna, and then at the last minute they decide, oh, we won't give this to Rihanna, we'll give it to Britney Spears instead. So all these artists are being used for are just, outlets for these songs that are being churned out on a conveyor belt by the music industry machine. So I'm just not feeling any of it. So your question about whether Prince would be relevant to this generation, probably not. I think it would take somebody of a certain age who remembers different styles of music and remembers days when the industry flourished in a much more natural way to appreciate what somebody like Prince has put out there. So yeah, when it comes to Prince, it was a total shock. And I'm sure you've noticed, guys, 2016, quite a lot of famous people have been dying this year. And they're even talking about this in the mainstream. What is it about 2016? Right from the very start of the year, so many celebrities have been biting the dust. I think Natalie Cole was one of the early ones this year, if I'm not mistaken. And then pretty much from that point on, it's been a different celebrity pretty much every day or every other day. So David Bowie was 11th of January, and there's just been so many since then, it's ridiculous. So Prince is the latest in a long line, and it really feels like we're losing so much talent, particularly to have lost David Bowie and Prince within just a few weeks of each other.
It's inconceivable, really, isn't it, Mark? If somebody had said that to you this time last year, you just would have gone, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, it does.
And so there are many different possibilities here and interpretations you can put on it. I mean, first of all, you can go with the mainstream version of events, the official version, which is all these famous people just happen to have died, and it's very sad and it's very tragic, but it's just the way it goes. They've died of cancer, they've died of heart attacks or whatever it is, the flu. Prince died of the flu, yeah, right. Because that happens to a lot of guys at 57, doesn't it, that are vegan and that work out. They just happen to die of the flu in a lift.
I'm pretty sure Prince isn't short of money either, so he could afford the best food, the best health care.
Well, this is the other thing. You hear of guys like David Bowie dying of cancer. Now, if David Bowie really was unfortunate enough to contract cancer, and I can't say whether he definitely had it or not, but supposing he did, do you not think David Bowie is the kind of wildly bohemian, rebellious, creative kind of individual that would not go for chemotherapy and radiotherapy and big pharma drugs, but would instead investigate alternative cures for cancer? So he'd be doing things like looking into Rick Simpson cannabis oil and looking into all these other natural compounds that we hear cure cancer, and yet there was no talk of that in the mainstream. You can understand why they would cover it up, but it's all very suspicious, and all these mainstream accounts of what happened never really seem to add up. So you can go with the mainstream version of all this, and then there's the more conspiratorial take on it, which is that a lot of these artists are actually being taken out for whatever reason, whether it's ritual sacrifice, whether it's because they're becoming a thorn in the side of the establishment, or they're not playing ball with some agenda or other, and so they've got to go. And you kind of have to wonder, if you're open-minded and if you're prepared to go wherever research takes you and consider all the options, you have to wonder whether there's an element of this going on. And then the third kind of interpretation that people can put on it is that the likes of David Bowie and Prince haven't actually passed away the way we're told they did, but in some way they've kind of faked their deaths.
I said that to Matt last week about Prince. I said, we're fed the mainstream narrative that the man's died, but who's to say he hasn't?
We were talking about this earlier, Mark, and we were talking about the fact that everything happened quite quickly around Prince, as in they found the body, an autopsy was done. 1 hour after the autopsy was done, the body was released. About 5 hours after that, a nice little ceremony, and the body's cremated. And no one got to see any little part, any piece of that. Therefore, what the heck is going on with that? A lot of people thought that was quite quick, the way that was handled. So, there's
a lot of things.
Sorry. I'm up in the air about that. Obviously this is what's going on. This is what was stated. It is what it is. What does your gut tell you about what's going on with Prince?
Well, whenever you get a prominent artist supposedly dying in circumstances like this, there are always so many anomalies and discrepancies and things that don't add up, and so researchers that try and get to the bottom of what really happened just get tied up in knots and get sent down one rabbit hole after another, and if you're not careful you can just get absolutely mad with frustration and you can start to lose your mind. So you really do have to stay grounded and take a deep breath with all of this stuff and keep it all in context. My gut feeling with Prince, I've got to say, is that he was done away with. I think he probably has died. I'm not saying that artists don't fake their deaths necessarily. We've heard that with so many artists over the years. There were strong rumours that Elvis in some way faked his death and went off to live out his final years out of the public spotlight. There have been rumours in the hip-hop world that Tupac in some way faked his death. We get it with Jim Morrison. We've had it with Michael Jackson. There are even some researchers that claim that John Lennon faked his death. I mean, who can possibly say with any certainty whether any of these things happened or didn't? I certainly can't. You know, all of them remain a possibility. But my instinct when it comes to Prince is that he's no longer with us and that he was got rid of in some kind of ritualistic fashion, because there's so much symbolism and so much evidence to suggest that this was the case that, as far as I'm concerned, it can't be overlooked. And what you were saying about things happening very quickly, I don't know if you saw, but I think it was certainly no more than 2 days after we got the news of Prince having died, Niagara Falls in the US was illuminated in purple. Did you see that?
I didn't see Niagara Falls. I saw the Empire State Building and a few other things, but not Niagara Falls.
How did they do that so quickly?
Beyond 3.
Right, exactly. Well, they illuminated the Niagara Falls in purple and drenched it in this purple light. And they were saying it's purple rain, you know, with the water all cascading over the waterfall.
Mm-hmm.
All the headlines were saying purple rain. And it was supposed to be in tribute to Prince. And they drenched all these other monuments and landmarks in purple as well. And it struck me that they'd managed to organise all of that very quickly. When you think about the logistics that would be involved in getting the Niagara Falls lit up like that, you know, all the equipment and all the stuff that would have to be brought in, and then you have to get the cameras there to make sure it gets out to the media and stuff, and there'd have to be all these teams on the ground organising everything. That was put together very quickly, within a day and a half or 2 days of the news. So that's just one of so many anomalies. It does tend to suggest foreknowledge of what was going to happen, or I suppose it's possible that the whole thing, you know, was some kind of hoax and that it was planned for a long time before. I can't really say with any certainty. All I can do is highlight some of the very strange stuff that went on. And then of course we have the fact that Prince's reported death coincided with the 90th birthday celebrations, what the hell is there to celebrate, of the Queen of England, or the Queen of Germany, if you want to be precise about it.
Yeah, very good.
But yeah, the 90th birthday of the Queen of England, a lot of conspiracy researchers are suggesting that Prince's death, or his reported death, in some way constitutes some kind of sacrificial gift to the Queen, because, you know, you have Prince and then the Queen, and then a lot of newspapers have been using the headline Purple Rain, as in R-E-I-G-N, you know, and doing a bit of wordplay there. So there's all kinds of symbolic clues if you want to go down that route. And there's also the fact that the 19th of April represents the start of a long period associated in the ancient world with sacrifice by fire, leading up to the 1st of May, which is Beltane ritual, which is a time that's very important in the dark occult calendar to many of these dark occult practitioners. And there have been so many prominent events which have happened on or around the 19th and 20th of April over the years. There was the Waco siege in Texas, there was the Oklahoma City bombing, there was the Boston Marathon event, there was a whole load of others that have all occurred around these times, and they've all been associated with death. So here we have the reported death of Prince coinciding with that same time frame, and tied in to the 90th birthday of the Queen. And the Queen, of course, is very deeply tied into this satanic dark occult network that we have, basically controlling human affairs around the globe. She's very key to it. People like to think she's got no power and that it's all ceremonial and that she's just good for tourism and all that nonsense, but you know, she's very deeply involved in all this, trust me.
Clint, if I can ask you something real quick, as Mark was mentioning this, when was the Port Arthur massacre?
Oh, go back to Mark. Let me just...
I'm trying to figure that out because I'm thinking it was coming up around this time, actually. It would be an anniversary. I got
to feed the mouse that turns the wheel in my head.
I got you. You got to feed the mouse that turns the wheel in your head. Okay, Mark. Okay, that's the one thing. Now, about the whys for all of this. Now, Prince was wealthy. He had his own empire insofar as music was concerned. He had pissed a few people off. Insofar as they talk about the fact that, you know, he went around, he did an end around and basically got his masters back and got everything that he needed to get done. And I can guarantee you people will definitely hold grudges over that. Little Richard went through a similar situation. James Brown went through a similar situation. Ray Charles didn't have to because he made sure he kept all of his masters. So this has gone on before, but it seems to me that some people in the music industry, some artists in the music industry, tend to fall into this trap, so to speak. And one of the ones I wanted to bring up that's very important to me was Whitney Houston. So we're going to have to talk about Whitney Houston coming up in a little bit. But Clint is looking at me with wide eyes open, so let's see what he has to say here. Go ahead.
I think it's late April, and it was 1996, because I remember what I was doing that day. I was writing an essay.
So once again, it falls into Mark's time frame for around the April going into May.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's another one that could be another sacrifice. What was that, 37 people or something like that?
35 people, I think.
Massacred, yeah. So that would fall into it as well. Now, in your book, Mark, you do talk about Whitney Houston, and you talk about Clive. I'm not going to say his last name. And everything that went on. I'll give you a quick background on Whitney Houston as far as I'm concerned. My cousins were in a group called LTD. Love, Togetherness, and Devotion, back in the 1970s going into the 1980s. My cousin's Jeffrey Osborne, a singer, R&B singer, and he wrote one of the songs on Whitney Houston's...
The Wings of Love and all that.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly who he is. And he wrote one of Whitney Houston's songs for her debut album. Now, she actually went on tour with him. And she was the opening act for him when her first album came out, so I got to meet her and her parents, and she was just a stunningly beautiful, lovely young woman with a voice that just struck me as just incredible. And I literally got to watch her self-destruct over the decades, and it's just an interesting story, so maybe we can get into a little bit what you know about what she went through with that.
That's because Kevin Costner left her.
Oh, let's not go there. That doesn't matter whatsoever.
I did a podcast interview yesterday with Freeman, the researcher from America, and also a guy called Matt Sergiu, who is a UK researcher. And we were discussing all these elements of Prince. And Matt raised the point that when you think back to the very biggest US artists of the 1980s, you could certainly make a case for that being Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Prince, and Madonna. And so out of those four, we've lost three. And we're left with Madonna, who is often referred to as the grand priestess of the industry, because she is, in the same way as Jay-Z is quite senior in the pecking order now, as we mentioned the other time. Madonna would appear to be very far up the ladder when it comes to, being a part of the agenda and being used for it. She's obviously famously into Jewish Kabbalistic ritual magic. Yes. And she's performed at Grammys award shows and the Super Bowl show and stuff, and her shows have been absolutely drenched in occult symbolism. It's like an A to Z of symbology. So she's very much doing the bidding of her industry masters, and she's obviously a chosen one, and she's obviously a favourite for unrolling certain parts of their dark occult agenda. So we still have Madonna, because presumably she's still being put to use and they still have plans for her. But when it comes to Michael Jackson, Prince and Whitney Houston, they've all gone, and there are very suspicious elements surrounding the reported deaths of all of them. There's a lot of parallels, actually, between Michael Jackson and Prince when you get down to it. Michael Jackson, Prince and Madonna were all born in 1958. And then you have the fact that Prince and Michael Jackson both grew up in households with abusive fathers. I think everyone knows the story of Joe Jackson, Michael's dad, and how he pushed all his kids into the showbiz limelight. But Prince's father apparently was very abusive towards him as well. And this is actually documented in the movie Purple Rain, which is an autobiographical movie from Prince. Very good film, actually, often overlooked, but a great movie, always been one of my favourites. And it kind of tells the story of how Prince came up in the game and his home life. And then you have the fact that both Michael Jackson and Prince got into legal wrangles with their record labels related to publishing and masters and stuff like that, and both of them were highly critical in public about their record labels. Michael Jackson famously referred to the Sony Corporation as evil, and to the Sony CEO Tommy Mottola as the devil. And then you had Prince, who came out very vocally against Warner Brothers and complained about the deal that he was getting through them and the way he was being exploited. And for a time he appeared with the word slave etched across his face, indicating that he considered himself to be a slave of the industry. So that would have pissed off his overlords, certainly. But, you got parallels there between Prince and Michael Jackson. And so it's interesting that Prince, Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston, who were highly influential and whose music uplifted and inspired a lot of people, an entire generation during the 1980s, have all been got rid of. And a lot of researchers have highlighted what are quite possibly sacrificial elements and ritual elements to the ways in which they were done away with. So getting round to Whitney Houston, she was discovered dead in a bathtub in the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Los Angeles, February 2012, and it was at the time of the Grammy Awards of that particular year. And what happened was, when the news of her death broke and hit the mainstream, there was a Grammys party going on in that hotel on the ground floor, hosted by Clive Davis. Clive Davis is a long-time record industry executive. He's been in the industry for decades, and he's credited with having discovered Whitney Houston and put her on the map. So, he's very much her mentor, and she was his protege. And so this party was being hosted by him. And it had become common knowledge by the time the party had started that Whitney Houston was lying dead in a bathtub a few floors above. And for some reason, her body wasn't removed straight away. It remained in that bathtub until sometime around midnight, when it was finally taken away. So you had this party going on downstairs when her body was up above. And a lot of people that were at that party, and one of them was Shaka Khan, the artist, who later came out in a few interviews, said that they considered it very strange and actually in poor taste that this party continued. And there seemed to be almost a celebratory air to it, as if the party was celebrating the ritual passing of this goddess diva figure, Whitney Houston. So that alone is very strange. Then you have the fact that Bobby Christina, Whitney's daughter, with Bobby Brown, was discovered unconscious in the same bathtub, in the same hotel suite, 24 hours before Whitney's body was discovered. So what the hell is all that about? And, bathtubs is a recurring theme, because in January 2015, Bobby Christina was discovered again, unconscious, unresponsive, in a bathtub, this time at her home in Georgia. And she's said to have been discovered by her husband, even though it emerged later on that he was never actually her husband. What's the guy's name? Nick something, I forget his other name. But, he was presented as her husband, but he turned out not to be. And there was a family friend that came forward at the time that this news broke, saying that she didn't believe that Bobby Christina would ordinarily have been in a bath. She wouldn't have taken a bath, because she said ever since what happened to her mother, she was obviously very traumatized by the fact that her mother was found dead in a bathtub. She wouldn't go anywhere near them. She was terrified of bathtubs. She always took showers. And yet, she's discovered in a bathtub. And so she was then taken to hospital in a coma, and she remained in a coma for several months until July of 2015, when she finally passed. So that's led a number of other conspiracy researchers to ask whether Bobby Christina's death was some kind of ritual sacrifice in line with what happened to her mother. So many things that just don't add up. You know, we weren't given a proper cause of death for Whitney Houston. The mainstream media just tends to be relying on the public's perception of her as having been this wild character that just went off the rails. You know, she hooked up with Bobby Brown and he got her into drugs, and she just went in this downward spiral and her life became a mess. You know, that's the perception of her that's been pushed by the mainstream for the past few years. But there was no official cause of death given. It was just implied that she'd taken an overdose. And you get this with a lot of artist deaths. You know, when it comes to Jim Morrison, for instance, there was no coroner's report, there was no autopsy. It was hinted at that he'd taken some kind of overdose, but there was no official cause of death given. And, you know, it's very hazy with Michael Jackson as well. And then when you get to Prince, initial reports were suggesting that he died of the flu. How the hell do you die of the flu at 57, you know? And then they were suggesting, then it kind of changed. And there were hints that he was on drugs, he was taking some kind of narcotics, and then that kind of changed into, oh, he was on some pharmaceutical medication and it may have been that killed him. So everything is ambiguous, everything is hazy, and we're just left to kind of make the best of it. And most members of the general public, I think, just can't be bothered to do the research. They get a bit confused and they just write it off, and they think, oh well, you know, it's rock and roll, it's music, artists die, they live these lifestyles, and it happens, let's move on. But, you know, for researchers that like to get to the bottom of this stuff, it really can confound you and drive you crazy.
Beyond 3.
Yeah, I think they get away with a lot of these artists' deaths just purely because people chalk it up as these wild rock and roll lifestyles. We all know that rock stars like their drugs, we all know that they live the fast life, we all know that they like a drink, and a lot of people just seem content to put all these deaths down to that. But one thing that I noticed when I was researching my book and I was going into the deaths of all these prominent artists, whether it's Jim Morrison or Jimi Hendrix or Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones or Robert Johnson going way back, or Bob Marley, John Lennon, Michael Hutchence, anyone you want to mention, is so many of these deaths are attributed to either an overdose, that's often all we get, just the word overdose, it's not specified any further, or suicides. And this happens a lot with the associates of many rock stars. So, you know, their spouses, their girlfriends, family members, people close to them, their managers. We're just told it's suicides. And so two of the most recurring themes throughout the stories that I cover in my book are suicides and overdoses. And again, most people just seem content to leave it at that without looking further into it.
Let me throw out an idea for you, Mark, because I've thought about this quite a bit. You've done a lot of research into this area, and let's take somebody like a Kurt Cobain or something like that, and he's portrayed as a troubled, disheveled, lost kind of a soul, but would you say that could have been part of his musical persona to sell records?
Well, I think it probably was, because the public does seem to lap up a kind of rebellious icon, a larger-than-life rock star that represents, you know, an edgy kind of lifestyle and angst and, you know, opposition to the establishment and all of that. There have been many of these types of figures through the decades. You know, Jim Morrison was certainly iconic in that way, and Kurt Cobain could be said to be, you know, another representation of that kind of iconic figure.
Yeah, but this is the thing with those kind of things. Excuse me, Mark. This is the thing with figures like that. We look at the industry and we look at the fact that the music industry is very well controlled. You find somebody and they portray a certain style of music and they do very well with it, and the industry sees them doing well. All of a sudden they come up and they say, you know, I'm really tired of this. But the industry says, no, you have to continue. and they say they're tired of this, all of a sudden you start seeing little ways for them to rebel. And if they take it too far, that's where I think your overdosing and things like that come in, because they say, no, if you don't do it our way, then you're going to leave.
Or they just don't release a record.
They've tried that with a lot of artists, but a lot of times, and I'll run this by you as well, Marcus. Clint and I were talking about this last week. This is the fact: music, everything in this universe is vibratory. We're talking about artists that can come through and literally get to the point where you can control so many different things. You can control people. You can really inspire people. They do not want that to be... The elitists have to control something along those lines. So being that that's the case, if you decide you have to leave the industry and basically stop doing what you're doing, they're not going to allow that to happen. So we have to be very careful with that. This is what's going on with a lot of these artists, I think.
I don't think you ever can truly leave the industry, not if you're one of their key players. I think you're in it for life. I mean, people are probably familiar with the famous interview that Bob Dylan did with Ed Bradley on 60 Minutes, where Bradley asks him what the secret is to his longevity, and he says, how have you managed to stay in the industry for so long? And Dylan, looking a bit kind of regretful and wistful, says, I made a deal a long time ago. And then, the host says, who did you make the deal with? And a bit later on he says, with the chief commander. And he kind of laughs. And then Ed Bradley says, the chief commander of this world? And then Dylan says, of this world and of the world we can't see. And he says, I'm holding up my end of the deal. So that ties into what a lot of industry insiders, and I've had so many musicians come forward, and producers and singers and people that have been involved in the industry, record industry executives, have come forward since I put my book out and since I've started doing public talks. My inbox is full every day with people reaching out to me to say, I've heard what you've had to say about what goes on in the industry, and I can tell you, you're absolutely correct because I've seen it with my own eyes. I've experienced this stuff, back in the 70s or the 80s or whatever, when I worked at this record label, or I was a part of this group, or I encountered this individual. What happens is you sign a contract with these corporations, and that contract basically binds you for life. Particularly when you become an A-list artist, when you become one of their key assets. I'm not saying that every single act that signs with a record corporation is bound for life, but if you become a John Lennon or a Bob Marley or a Michael Jackson or a Whitney Houston or a U2 or even Muse, the group Muse, or any of these other acts, you pretty much are bound by the industry and by that contract that you've signed, and you're doing what they say now, and there's no way out. And so they might allow you to go your own route for the first few years, and this is something that we do see play out. And just to use a couple of examples that I mentioned there, U2, I mean, we all know Bono's a piece of shit, and Bono is doing the bidding of his elitist masters now, and he's down with the eugenics agenda, and he's best mates with Bill Gates and stuff, and we know Bono's true nature. But when U2 first came out, they were allowed a few years to express themselves in a very convincing and very impactful way as a group that had a message in their music. They came out with stuff like New Year's Day and Sunday Bloody Sunday, and they were making statements, and they were allowed to do that for the first few years. They seemed to be this politically conscious band that was making music that really spoke to people, and it wasn't until quite a number of years down the line that Bono's true colours started to emerge, and he was put to use with his extracurricular activities. They sent him down to Africa as part of the United Nations, Agenda 21 and all that, and it became clear that Bono was working for, these elite controllers. But U2 did a very convincing job of making people think they were this genuine music act. And then we had the same thing with Muse more recently, which is why I mentioned them. They brought out tracks like Uprising, and the lyrics to that are absolutely incredible in the context of what we know to be going on in the world and who really controls things and what the agenda is for the total spiritual, mental and physical enslavement of humanity. Muse were addressing that in Uprising, and they were saying, the human population is waking up, and we're not going to take it anymore. We're going to rise up and take our power back. And then you had Ralph Bellamy, the frontman of Muse, making comments in public interviews about 9/11 being an inside job. And then what do you find? A couple of years down the line, Ralph Bellamy retracts his comments, and he comes out and says, I was mistaken, I now understand that 9/11 happened the way we were told it did, and I was wrong. And no more tracks from Muse talking about we're going to rise up and take our power back. So it's either that these artists are allowed to go their own way for a short while, and if they're seen to be becoming a bit of a pain in the arse and a thorn in the side of the establishment, and they're saying things they would prefer that they didn't, then they're quickly brought into line and co-opted with the agenda and told, right, you're now going to start making songs like this, and you no longer talk about this sort of stuff in interviews, and this is what we're going to have you doing now, because we own you and we control your ass. Or it's that they sort of come out with this stuff, and it's all part of the long-term plan, which is it was always on the cards that these groups would eventually be pushing the agenda of the elites, but they put the public off their guard for the first few years by making these groups seem as if they're on our side and they're expressing what's on our minds, and they're genuine and authentic. People even attribute that to the Beatles. When you look at the Beatles music, when that group first came out, for the first few years, for the first half of their career really, they were making just quite innocent, pleasant love songs really. Most of their songs were, these nice simple rhythm and blues based arrangements, and they were saying things like she loves you and please please me and from me to you and I want to hold your hand. And it was all pleasant, innocent music. Then round about 1966, as the second half of their career kicked off, everything changed. That's when we got into the psychedelic era, and there were all these social changes going on in the UK and the US. The Vietnam War had started. There were all these artists coming out of Laurel Canyon, the folk rock scene, and all the connections there to military intelligence that we can get into. You had the Manson murders happening, and you had all this LSD had been unleashed on the American youth. All these massive social changes, the arrival of the contraceptive pill and the sexual emancipation that brought about. And in the midst of all of this, the Beatles' music changed big time. It became experimental, it became psychedelic, it had all these big orchestral arrangements, it became very tripped out. And you've got to wonder, is that the natural evolution of a group just exploring themselves creatively and just happening to want to go down that route? Or were the Beatles always intended to be used for mind control and social manipulation and the shaping of public perceptions and attitudes? And what they did was, for the first few years, they put the public off their guard, made everyone fall in love with the Beatles because they're these four lovable guys from Liverpool making these nice songs. And then at the chosen time, which in this case would be 1966, everything gets switched up. And, they just rely on people being swept along with it and just going with the flow.
Mark, this is going to have to go for another show, so what I'm going to have to say to you is thank you, because now we have to wind it up because we're just run out of time. So Mark's book is called Musical Truth. We will put up on our Facebook page all of your blogspot.com information, all of the information on your talks. So we here at Beyond 3D would like to thank Mr. Mark Devlin for talking with us, and we will definitely get in contact with you again, Mark, because the information is just too good to pass up. So thank you for your time, and Clinton and I both appreciate that.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, time flies. Thank you.
It does indeed.
Beyond 3D.
I really enjoyed that.
The thing about it is you need more information even. I can totally understand what Mark is saying, but you can literally name an artist and he will probably be able to get some information and do some research on them and find out exactly what's going on in their world. And that to me is very, very interesting.
Olivia Newton-John.
Yeah, even Olivia Newton-John with that thing with the guy that jumped off the boat and disappeared and everything along those lines.
He's still alive.
Is he? In Mexico somewhere?
Yeah. No, he turned up. I saw it on the front page of a woman's TV.
Well, then it must be true.
It must be true. It must be true.
Yeah, but guys,
Can I
what
please
we will
give you,
do...
how much do they cost now? I have no idea.
Oh,
Last time I had to buy one for my mum, I think that was about $1.60.
Oh,
now I'd say that was about $8. I'm probably totally off the mark. Can I give you $8 to give me a book back of just alleged stuff?
Oh my goodness, I don't know.
Printed?
I'll tell you what though. We thank Mark for the information, and you guys, we will put up his blog posts and everything like that on our Facebook page. That way you can delve into and imbibe a lot more of the information that he has out there. So that's absolutely fantastic. Not bad. Anyway, what else do we have? I'm thinking now.
No, that's it. We're out of time again.
Are we? Oh, yeah. Wait a minute. Prince.
Yeah.
Have they found anything out yet?
Oh, look. Alfred Jackson has called for the singer's remaining material to be released. Now, do you know who Alfred Jackson is?
I'm trying to think of the name. Who is it?
Nothing to do with Michael Jackson.
No, I wasn't thinking.
Alfred Jackson is Prince's half brother.
Half brother. Okay.
He's his half brother. He's really pushing to get the rest of Prince's material out there on the market for everybody to experience. And I'm all for that.
No, I'm for that. But then
again,
well.
Alfred's gonna get a kickback from it because Prince didn't leave a will.
Oh well.
So the family gets to divvy it up. So it's in the family's best interest, and it's in everybody's best interest. I don't care if Prince's family.
The family, the money. Look, the fact of the matter is, when it comes to an estate that size, here's what happens. The United States of America, a.k.a. the government, gets half. They don't care. Let the other guys have the other half. God bless them. Good luck to them. And hopefully they use it for actually really good purposes that can help other people.
But say, hang on.
Put the music out.
Wouldn't an auditor come in and go, well, what's this worth? What's this back catalogue worth? The government's not going to go, well, that's worth $3 billion. Well, it's untapped potential. They're not going to give it to Alfred.
No. But the fact of the matter is, they can turn over everything, papers and everything. Like, I have some of my grandfather's music that was never released. It's written down in tablature. Have it all there. If I release it and I can make some money, the government's going to get their money anyway. That's the whole thing. If they can release Prince's back catalogs, all that, as soon as it makes money, the government will be there saying, gimme.
I'll show you a way that I thought, which definitely won't work, but it just might for you. Next time.
Okay.
Next time. Have a good night, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.